Welcome to Wellness Radio with Dr. Jeanette Gallagher as your host. Her show discusses topics of health, wellness, and spirituality, and is about discovering your place in this great universe, from your cells to the cosmos. Along with her guests, in casual conversation, she strives to ask the difficult questions that may be holding you back from a vibrant life, and shares new ideas that may inspire you to make a change in your life that you only can see in your dreams. And now, here is Dr. Jeanette Gallagher.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Wellness Radio. This is Dr. Jeanette Gallagher, and it's a pleasure to have you with us here this evening. Tonight, we are going to be talking about an absolutely lovely life story. How does our life unfold? What are our stories all about? And what are the generations going to be able to take from it and say, wow, I never knew that story. Oh, can you tell me that story again? Or I never knew that things went on in those generations or those decades of life. Truly, what I'm talking about is a memoir. And the book today we're going to be talking about is Bond of Brothers, Our Stories, Our Legacies by Bob and Nick Finamore. What I think is very important, and I was distinctly stood out when I picked up the book, was that if we remember, I myself almost 70 and the brothers are over 80, we think back in the times in which we always used to sit around the kitchen table. All of our relatives lived close by. We came in, we'd talk, we'd share things. It was almost as if our relatives were our own social media. It was someone to bounce something off. Hey, I feel this today. Hey, what are you doing today? Hey, I need help today. Yet we're looking at it now in the year 2025, and that really has taken a step back, and those connections are not as tight as they used to be, or they may not be existent for many. What we're going to be doing is just sharing a wonderful journey with Bob and Nick and be able to say, wow, this is an awesome life, and how they shared it. And what's important is when we take information from a memoir, is we could say, I was there, I did that, and it will trigger thoughts in our own memories to find our own joy in our life story. Bob and Nick, thank you so much for joining us today. It's a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
So glad to have you both because, I think just as I shared, we don't have these stories all the time that we've shared with the kids. Sometimes we haven't written them down. We find that generations are just kind of missing out on the times of our lives. I think that perhaps, Bob, when you shared about your book and your story in the book, there was really a lot of information in there that it said, these are the good times of my life. And the overtone in this book was definitely positive, joyful, and inspirational. Was that the goal?
Well, sports, of course, we all enjoy sports. It was an integral part of my life. And I started playing baseball when I was 13 years old. In Haledon, New Jersey, I played with the PAL. And actually, my father was the coach of the team. So we kind of bonded together during that experience. And then I went on to high school, played baseball at high school. Fortunately, I received a Division I football scholarship to Memphis State, which provided a lot of opportunities for me. Sports taught me a lot. Discipline, overcoming adversity. Of course, it gives you self-esteem, fosters friendships. Even today, at this age, I still stay in contact with a lot of my teammates who are located all over the country.
Wow!
So it's done a lot. It's been a very fortunate experience for me.
So let me jump in here, Dr. Jeanette, in that the reason it's called Bond of Brothers, as we wrote the book, Bob wrote his portion, and I wrote mine, but we collaborated along the way, and we had an editor that edited the book. When she read it, she said, "Oh my God, you guys stayed in touch and helped each other along the way," and that's true. Because Bob kind of went on a sports line, and I went more on a scientific engine. I became an engineer and what have you, and worked for AT&T. So that kind of we did that split, but we always stayed together. Therefore, bond of brothers.
Right, just like I said before, you were your own social media. You know what I mean? You kept in touch, because there's so many times that families, drift apart when the miles get between them, or when their life circumstances, spread them apart. But yet they really don't understand how tightly bond they may have been if they had a chance to nurture it, don't you think?
Absolutely. And you hit a nerve in terms of, we talk a lot about, we were at the family table quite a bit, with grandparents, and that's where we learned our values. We got our values.
That's right.
And people don't do that today, and they're getting it from social media, which is way out of whack. But so
yeah. Absolutely. And a lot of your stories, the things that y'all did and everything, people may have done that, but then they're always going to have confirmation or validation. Is this right or wrong? I mean, I remember doing things in the 50s, it's sort of like pretty much we were a nomad soul. When you walked out that door, you could do whatever you wanted. It was opened up to you. And you kind of did, you know what I mean? If you took the bike down the street, and you went off the top of a coal dump, hey, awesome, and it was just, you learned if you fell, you learned if you made it, and you might have gone on to something else and took the skills that you learned.
Also, we drank out of the water fountains, and we ate a lot of peanut butter, never got sick.
I know. I drank out of the hose from the backyard.
Right. We lived close to the playground, and of course after school we come home, we put our kids on dungarees, and we go down to the field and play. At 5 o'clock, our father would go out on the porch and he'd whistle, and as soon as we heard the whistle, we dropped everything and ran home because we knew the consequences if we didn't get home on time for dinner.
But making your point, though, we headed off on our own and played all day without the supervision. And by the way, the interactions with our friends really brought us a lot of value, in terms of how to react together.
Yeah, but I think that's vitally important in the way our lives unfolded. And as you shared in your book, how your lives unfolded, too. Because, distinctly, too, I wrote on one page, let's say, you said after finishing high school, I wanted to enter the Army and then pursue the field of athletics. But it's very important to understand that life circumstances and history played out a lot in our decisions. A lot of people went into the military because it was post-war. But then they were kind of, do we go to school and learn something else? I know in my generation and yours too, not everybody was going to college. You might have been the 1 to 5%, don't you think?
Absolutely. Yeah, right. Yeah, they went off on, and some not a college career, some military. You're absolutely right. But we found our way. Yeah.
I think it was kind of cool in a way because, you wrote about going to Memphis for college. I went to New Orleans. I was left off with my hard shell yellow Samsonite one luggage piece on the corner of Canal Street and Bourbon Street. And it was sort of like, see you later, and I had to find my way too. And I think when we go to these other times, kids nowadays are saying, oh, well, I have to have my bank account, put everything up together, and, what are you going to do for me idea. I think we tried to, I think back in those decades of time, and it's important to share these stories because we learned, how do you find your way when it's not written for you? Perhaps?
Absolutely. Yeah. And, of course, Bob had a different experience than I did in that with sports. He was together with the players in Memphis State, which helped, working together. And unfortunately, I was more of a commuting guy to college, and I had to go back and forth. So I didn't have the opportunity to make as many friends. I'll put it that way.
Right.
Well, actually, initially I was supposed to go to Minnesota. I was recruited to Division I football, go north, play for the Golden Gophers. But the coach who recruited me went to Memphis State. So the 3 other boys and myself, we went down south. We didn't know too much about Memphis. The only thing I knew was on the Mississippi River. Elvis Presley lived there, and it was very hot. So I wasn't too thrilled with that. I liked the cold weather, but 4-year scholarship, I couldn't pass on it.
You know, I knew nothing about New Orleans when I got dropped off either. All I knew is that it was on the bottom of the map, you know, because I lived in Pennsylvania at the time. So it was like, hey, you're going down that way. See you later. So I think that we learned that to have the experiences for every day we got up, something else was new. It wasn't like it was written out. You know what I mean? In other words, there weren't a lot of people doing what we were doing. We were all just kind of learning by the seat of our pants, don't you think?
Well, actually, going to Memphis, going down south at that time, 1958, 60, was culture shock because you had your Jim Crow rules, and we knew nothing about that living up north. So it was kind of a shock to see different fountains for the colored people, for the white people. They couldn't sit in the front of the bus. They couldn't go into the restaurant. So that's something we had to adjust to.
Yeah, and in fact, a story comes to mind is our father got drafted into World War II, even though he had 2 children. And my brother and my mother took a train down to Camp Butker, Alabama.
Dothan, Alabama.
And when they came back, they told us the stories of the colored-only bathroom. They couldn't believe it. We just weren't exposed in the North to that, and we had to, deal with that.
Yeah, I wasn't pre-exposed either. I got dropped off, and I had to find it my own way at that. And it was still going on when I came here.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I definitely understand. Yeah, it was interesting. You know what also, too, I thought was important that you shared? And I thought, I mean, I love the stories because it's something that I can relate to, and I think that our listeners and definitely your readers can find this, that when you read this book, you always turn around and say, oh, I did that. Oh, isn't that cool? Oh, I remember. So it's kind of like you're walking along with you, not on the same path, but you're walking along with you through your own memories. Isn't that what we're really talking about?
Oh, absolutely. Yep. And we had there's a lot of memories in there, and some are really outstanding. I don't know. Did you pick up any that you want to talk more about?
I have tons of them. We're going to get to them. Yep. Listen, there was one that I thought was really cool. When you talked about respect, you talked about dressing nice and everything. And I distinctly remember that because I raised my kids like that too. And I wrote on the top of the page, I said, respected and honorable citizens. Do you remember that in the 50s, 60s, and 70s when people they looked at you and they said they're respected and they're honorable citizens when they were dressed nice?
Oh, sure. Well, back in the 60s when I traveled back and forth from Memphis to New Jersey, I flew a few of the times. People were dressed up. They got on a plane with a jacket. Yeah. The women wear dresses.
Nylon.
And all our football games were played on a Saturday night in Memphis, home games, and everybody came dressed up.
Yep. Yeah.
And they act civil, They
different.
There was no fighting in the stands or riots starting. It was a different time. People were different, very different.
Yeah, a lot of respect. And that one of the things I think about on that is we respected our grandparents so much. We didn't want to disappoint them in getting in trouble or doing something. You know what I'm saying? We looked at them and said, the last thing we would want is for them to look at us and get disappointed in what we did. So that was
I think honor and values and morals was very well ingrained in us every single day, I think, no matter what we did. And now I don't even know if you asked a kid, in their 30s now, what is a moral or what is respect? They might not even have an answer, don't you think?
Yeah. Well, yep.
Plus, you got to factor in the discipline in those days.
Right.
With our mother, it was more fun and games. But with Dad, once we knew Dad was coming home because Mother called him from the diner, we were in trouble. And he had hand like the side of a ping pong paddle.
Yeah. Don't you think that all the fathers had big hands in those days because they actually worked every day?
Oh, yeah. Physical labor, sure.
Yeah. Yes.
Sure. Yeah.
Well, our father started a diner, a typical Jersey diner in Haledon,
right.
Jersey. And you know what? We learned a lot from the customers that came in. We had plumbers and bakers and auto body guys, and it was always in the morning. It was like a get together, and we would learn a lot from the banter back and forth, and they comedy and laugh a lot. But that was another place where we were able to develop values that we saw.
But wasn't the restaurant another thing, just like the kitchen table? You came in and you learned about all the other people's lives. I mean, how would you know what you wanted to do in life, or how would you know how to fix something or how to do this or that if you didn't have a conversation with other different types of people, right?
Absolutely. And that was a unique opportunity that we got where we were exposed to lots of different people. It was something, and it was like a towny place in the morning for breakfast, and we would listen to all these stories, and
we got an education and a lot of things.
Yeah.
And also, too, you talked about your spouses, and you talked about, getting jobs and things. I also think about it, with my own ancestors. A lot of the mills were around then, a lot of the factories for women. All of my ancestors, the women, they all were in the sewing mill down the street. Everybody lived within a mile, my goodness, probably for 80 or 90 years. So they all worked at the same mill, the lace factory or the sewing one on the corner. I think that's important, too, is to understand that everyone had a part in engaging and contributing to the whole. It's sort of like when you have a restaurant, you're feeding the people in your area. You're feeding the workers. When you're going out and you're doing the sewing job, you're going out and doing the sewing because everybody needs it. In other words, you could see the world's cycle just in your own neighborhood. Do you know what I mean?
Exactly. Now we were unique in Haledon, New Jersey. I don't know if you know the geography, but we were just outside Patterson, and Patterson was the silk city of the country. And you make the point, but all of our relatives in one way or another worked in those silk factories.
Yeah.
And it was hard work, dye shops with, high temperatures and whatever. And so, you learn that discipline too, hard work, and it doesn't hurt you to engage in that.
Right. Yeah, I lived in Scranton at the time, so all of mine worked at the Scranton lace mill, the lace factory. Yep. So also, too, I think I wanted to touch on the topic about football and the sports. Because with the sports, you said about, the helmets weren't protective and stuff like that. I remember having my first son, and I don't think we even had a car seat for him because they weren't invented yet. So, this whole idea of you have to protect at all costs really wasn't around when you and I were all growing up, yes?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, actually, the helmet that were issued in the 60s, the late 50s and 60s, inside was a rope, and then it held a little donut, maybe a quarter inch, and that was all the protection you had. So when your head started banging around in there, you're hitting the helmet, the actual helmet. Yep. But
that's awesome.
Compared to today, we had more padding in those days. Today, that no knee pads, no thigh pads. You had hip pads, you had thigh pads, you had knee pads, you had shoulder pads, and you had the helmet. So you had a lot of weight to carry around.
Right. Don't you think that you went out and you tried to make it work and tried to, in other words, you said, I have to get a goal on the thing, and how do I get there? It wasn't always that they had all of the answers. They just kind of said, get out there and get it done, right?
Yeah,
right, exactly. Yeah. Well, you learn how to overcome adversity and prove your self-esteem, discipline, and
yeah, you know, one story comes to mind. We were talking about that playground near our house, and we used to play stickball and whatever. And the way we chose sides was that we throw the bat up in the air and you'd catch it, and you'd have you ever did your fingers and this and that.
Hand over hand.
Well, the point of the story is we're there, and they start picking sides. And one of the guys turns to me, I don't want him, he stinks. Well, I hurt my feelings, but what did I do? Did I run and cry? No. For 2 or 3 weeks, I worked my tail off to get better, so they wouldn't say he stinks. You know? Yeah. And that was what we did. You
and that's the way you had to find your way, right?
There you go.
Yeah. You know what, also, too, I saw on the page, and it says about when the teacher had said, what do you want to be when you grow up? And you said an airplane pilot, Nick. And that I thought that was so interesting because I distinctly remember when I was getting ready to go to college, I had no concept of what I was going to do. And I said, I don't know, I want to be a stewardess. And I think that was typical kind of in that generation time. That was when airplanes were first starting and, you know, people traveling. And I thought it was kind of cool to see that.
Yeah, my story, though, I don't know if you recall, but I don't know if it was in this book. Because, you know, we had a pre-book, a book before this called Two Jersey Brothers, and it was a lead into this. But anyway, the story I was going to tell is when I was 5 years old, I got rheumatic fever. And the doctor told my mother I had to stay in bed for like 2 or 3 months. And to recover, and that was what we did in those days. In any case, it was in the summertime, and no air conditioning. We had screens, and I could hear the kids playing outside. But the point of the story is I got into listening to the radio, and let me tell you, you talk about opening horizons, and that the creativity of thinking about what was going on and imagining it. Well, the one program that I listened to all the time was Sky King, which was a pilot, and he flew with his niece, Penny. And those stories, and they were like detectives, flew all over the place. And I think that's really what got me intrigued about wanting to be a pilot.
In my yearbook, you know, at the end of the year, they ask you what you want to be. So under my photograph, I want to play professional sports.
Wow.
So in my senior year of college, I was drafted by the New York Jets. I was a free agent. So I spent some time with the Jets. Their training camp was in Peekskill, New York, and that was the year Joe Namath was signed to be quarterback for the Jets. So I broke some bread with him, and we talked occasionally. But unfortunately for me, I was released before the season started. So that dream never came true.
Well, yeah.
I also had a tryout with the New York Yankees, and that dream didn't come true also. So, but I had a successful career in sports, and I was able to go into teaching and just pass it on to the younger folks that I work with. So it was very gratifying for me.
Yeah, I think sometimes it doesn't always matter the absolute outcome. Like, in other words, do you put the period at the end of the sentence? But it's more about the journey, because you learn so much through the journey. And just as you said, you could then share that with others, and they may go on and take. In other words, you know, like when you think about those marathon runners, you hand off the torch, so to speak. Yes.
Yeah, the baton,
pass the baton, right. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about music for a minute because, music is so important in your life, Nick. And when I think about it, everybody was learning how to play something in those decades. That was a time when there was more joy. In the 30s, 40s, and 50s, there wasn't. Later in the 60s and 70s, everybody wanted to have music in their house. In other words, they were making money, they had their houses, now they had a good job, and they were looking at 2 cars in the driveway, so to speak, generation, and everybody was starting to learn. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. But you know what I hear so much these days. I started my uncle was my hero, my idol, and then he was an accordion player, and he traveled from Florida in the winter to Atlantic City in the summer, and was a professional musician. Well, I looked up to him, so I started playing piano. As time went on, I got into different bands, and I shifted to piano, which I play a lot now. What I hear, though, from everybody you talk, I wish I had taken piano lessons.
Yeah.
That's what you hear. Or some kind of an instrument. But
right.
I'm still active today. I played in a lot of bands, but I've cut, in fact, 4 CDs, and there are 2 of them are up on Spotify and different iTunes and what have you. And so I still stay. And to me, that keeps your mind active. I do a lot of playing for that reason,
Yeah, I remember I took piano. I started in kindergarten, and by the time I was in 4th grade, I was playing the pipe organ in the Catholic Church, singing the Latin Mass with the priest. Do you remember those days?
Yeah. Nice. Yeah.
Yeah, and I did that all the way to like 12th grade, but that was like 10 and 12 masses a week, and I'm thinking to myself now, how did I do that when I was 4th grade? How old was I in 4th grade? How did I actually do that? I know that I could not reach the pedals. Yeah, I knew it was a problem. But here I was, just belting it out in Latin.
Have you continued to play? Do you still play today?
No, I don't play anymore. I have not played for probably a few decades now. I just haven't. I don't know why. I just stopped.
I mean, I think if you get to a certain point, what I've found is you don't lose it like riding a bike. If you sit down, you may still be able to play somewhat.
Yeah. I had somewhat of a musical experience. It's a little disconcerting, though. Of course, Mom and Dad wanted us to both be musicians.
Right.
So they found that I might like the trumpet. So they bought me a trumpet. I started taking lessons, and I hated to practice. I wanted to be outside playing baseball or football. So if I had trouble with the note, I'd take the trumpet and I'd throw it against the wall.
Oh gosh! Oh goodness!
Yeah, the trumpet with a bell that was
and there was a talent show that Nick and I were in. And when they called me out on a stage, I was going to play the Sheik of Araby. Yeah. And I guess throwing it against the wall, one of the valves was bent a little bit.
Oh, gosh.
So I never got to finish. And that was the extent of my musical experience. But I took the trumpet to college with me. And he used to get up in the morning and play revelry in the dorm, the football dorm.
I'm sure they loved that.
Oh, and, they did that then. Yep.
I took the trumpet down to Beale Street in Memphis, and I hocked it for about $10.
Oh, gosh. Go figure. Yeah, that's something. Yeah, my son, I had him playing the saxophone, but he wanted to be outside playing ice hockey. So he did the same thing. He just he says, I'm going to take something with that. And he had the saxophone and the ice hockey stick. And I'm going, oh, no, this isn't going to happen. No, not going to happen. So I had to preserve it, Yep.
And hockey is a tough sport. I know when you get up early in the morning to get to these rinks, right?
Yeah, ice hockey, 4 o'clock in the morning. Yep, it was a trip.
Oh, God, yeah.
Ice time. You got to get ice time somewhere.
Yep, that's what it is. Well, you know what also, too, I think is that the idea is that you had people to look up to. And I think this stood out in your book, too. You share a lot of stories about people along the way. And you call them role models or people that you looked up to or others that were engaged in your lives. I cannot tell you how many people would turn around and say, I had someone that I really found the qualities of their life, and I just found them important to put them into my life. I don't think anybody does that anymore. But I know for myself, you know, I grew up a little different than you guys. I had a little bit different. I kind of went the other way. There was a lot of violence and trouble and stuff in my life, so my life was a different channel. However, I have similar things. I'll say, I'm not going to act like you. I'm going to do it this way, you know? So they were role models, but they were role models what not to do. But you shared in your book about wonderful qualities of so many people that you've met along your life. And I think that's very important.
Yeah, I found that especially in work. I had a 35-year career at AT&T, and I had lots of mentors that helped me along the way, and I looked up to and could, try to... appear like them and act like them, and really help me. So yeah, I absolutely agree with that.
Yeah,
and I think we'd have to mention our father being a role model.
Yeah,
in that I would characterize him hardworking, resilient, and his whole life was his work and supporting his family. And he owned a diner, like my brother said. He decided to bring a newer diner in. It cost him $80,000, and he lost it in 19 months. Wow. But after that, he's a survivor, and he built a hot dog stand on the same piece of property the diner was on, and then eventually he bought this 3-store building up at the corner, and he had a luncheonette. And he had his one floor he lived on, and the other he rented out. So,
So what we saw there is he was knocked down, but he got himself up, and he picked himself up, and just never let us down in terms of finances.
Yeah, I think also too, if you can just find the thread of what makes a life important, valued, and to be respected, I think those are the threads that you want to be able to have for generations, don't you think?
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, I'm jumping to the end of the book. I don't know if you read the last part, but we took a page out of City Slickers. I don't know if you recall that, with Billy Crystal. And one of the things that occurred in there was Curly told Billy Crystal the one secret of life, and he put his finger up. And Billy Crystal looked at him. He says, "Oh, you mean your finger?" He says, "No, there's one secret of life." And he said, "Well, what is it?" He says, "Well, you're going to have to find that out yourself." And what we do in the book is we talk about the fact that we think we found it along our journey, and that is family and familia in Italian. So that was a lesson learned along the way. We feel very strongly about.
And also, too, you share the story about when your father had a medical issue, and you said he needed help, and you went down to get him and to bring him back. And I think that always, as I work with many patients at end of life, they say that they don't have that period of time when they're able to give their story all out in maybe a one day's time. And they find all the highlights, they share all the regrets and their guilt, they share all their joys and their wonders, and they try to fit it in. So I think that you were able to do that with your father. You had, in other words, you had a warning sign and you had time to be able to cement that kind of closing of the gate, perhaps?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, he was in Florida and retired, and he called me and they had found cancer, and he got one. I said, "Dad, I'm going to get you home. We're going to get a second opinion." So I did fly down. It was like on a New Year's Eve, and we drove for 24 hours. and we got a chance to talk about a lot of things, is what you told. And so, yeah, I valued that. It was a great experience for me to have with that.
You also talk about caregiving in the book, and I think that's important because a lot of times people will say, I had my own way, I'm doing my own thing, you know. But then when you have to caregive and you have to take care of people and you have to pay attention to those around you, sometimes people will say, I'm not ready for that and I'm not going to do it. I know a lot of, these older men, there's no way in heck they're going to help anybody else out, because they'll be like...
let me talk to for my brother for a minute here, and that is his wife Shirley had COPD. And for 9 years, he was a caretaker. He really he did a lot because she got into a lot of difficulties at the end in terms of breathing and what have you. So he was a first-rate caretaker.
Yeah, I learned what it takes to be a caregiver, and nothing but praise for anybody that has to be involved in it. But if not me, who? That's what you have to do. You have to
step up.
Step up, put your mind to it, and do what you have to do.
Right, but it's also important. I mean, that shows how you're giving part of yourself. Do you know what I'm saying? In other words, a lot of people will they deny that part of themselves, and when you're really truly caregive, I think it draws the whole family together. Don't you think?
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, and what I found is it's very rewarding. In other words, for myself to do that. If you're unselfish and you give it without regard to the burden and what have you. So, I think a lot of people miss that. It's the giving, the willing of the other. So
I think
I knew that. I knew that I could do better than a professional. I knew my wife, and I knew I could take care of her, cook for her, bathe her, and give as much help as she needed.
Yeah.
So I retired in 2005, and I was a caregiver for those 3 years that she was alive.
And it was so important, an important time.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, guys, I think in conclusion, there was one sentence, rather one paragraph, that I think really ties your whole book together, and I thought it was so important to focus on it. You wrote, when you were talking about student driving, you wrote, I suggest that before they proceed, they first ride along with me and a student during a 2-hour session to see if they felt comfortable driving with a 16-year-old who had less than 6 hours of training. And the reason I focused in on that, and I said, that's because all along in your life, you have really gone out and learned things and explored things and did your best, but then you turned around and you taught others. You turned around and shared it with others. You turned around and gave back, so to speak. And that is the important gift of a life. It's not about what can I accomplish and check off so I can have a great obituary. It's about what did I give back for all that I've been given. And that's your life story, perhaps?
Talking about driver ed, it's not for everybody, believe me. Teaching a 16-year-old to drive on a highway at 60, 65 miles an hour in traffic in the city is not for everybody. You got to have a lot of patience, and you can't relax. Just when you think they're doing fine, that's when things go wrong. So you really got to be on top of your game when you're in that car with them.
That's really a reflection of life, though. We're letting kids out the door when they're 16 to 18 years old, and we're saying, hey, have at it, and you're not given any guidance. You don't have anyone holding your hand. You're just sent out into the world. So really, that's a reflection of the story, yes?
Right, yes.
Oh, absolutely. Although sometimes things can backfire on you in that I took my grandson out for driving lessons, And I took him over to a school and everything, and one of the things I did is parallel parking. Well, he'll never forgive me because he said it was too soon, and he had a lot of trouble with it. And but I thought that was important. I mean, to me, that's one of the most difficult things you're going to get on a driving test, and so you better be prepared. But he didn't fully appreciate that.
That's funny. Yeah, my daughter did not want to be taught by me. There was no way. She said she knew everything, get out of her way. And it was like, oh, dear, somebody else is going to teach that one.
We run into that a lot, too,
Yeah. Well, guys, it was such a pleasure to talk with you today because I think all of our stories of inspiration and joy is really something that people, especially in their older years and their decades of life, they're saying, I want to share my stories, but I don't know who to talk with. I'd say, hey, pick up the book and you can just have a conversation with yourself. You could sit down and write your own few notes. You could turn around and sit there and laugh as you read the book. And that's truly what the purpose is, yes?
Which, by the way, is the way this started is Bob's daughter said, look, I hear these stories. We got to get it down. And she recorded us, tape recorder. Yeah. And that kind of started us off. And then I had a friend who wrote a book on his boyhood in Brooklyn. And he said to me, Nick, he said, you got to write this. So there were two impetus that pushed us to do this. Because a lot of people tell us the same thing. Geez, I wish I wrote this out, and they never do. So we got
Another reason why we wanted to get that book out there, we're part of the silent generation. Yes. We were born between 1928 and 1945, some difficult times, and presently we make up only 4.29% of the population. So there aren't a lot of people out there, so that's why we want to get that book out there before that number's reduced. So those people should relate to it more than the older folks. The first book we're talking about, the two Jersey brothers.
But our main objective was for the grandkids to understand our lives and the slice of life that we lived, which is very different. So.
Yeah. Well, everybody that had elders then, they'll say, I wonder if, I wonder what, and I wonder where. And that's what we wanted to answer. So that was such a great story.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining me. Do you have a way that others can find out more information about your work?
Well, the book is up on Amazon. You know that, right?
Okay.
There's two books. The first one was Two Jersey Brothers, and that went from our birth to our first year in high school. And when we completed that, we said, we got to write the rest of our life. And the second book is Bond and Brothers. So they're both on Amazon, and can be purchased.
Another thing, we didn't do this for financial gain, obviously, and we haven't made a lot of money, but any proceeds that we receive from the sale of the books, we donate to three charities, Tunnel to Towers, Wounded Warriors, and Danny Thomas St. Jude's.
Very good. Yes, it's all about giving back, as we just shared.
Right.
Yes?
Right. The essence of living is giving.
That's right.
There you go.
That's our mission statement. The Finamore mission statement, all our family members, the essence of living is giving.
There you go.
That's right. Absolutely. Well, Nick and Bob, thank you so much for joining us today. Thanks. It was such a pleasure to have you.
Thank you.
Thank you for guiding us through this. It was a pleasure.
Thank you. If you'd like to find out more information about Bob and Nick Finamore, again, the book is Bond of Brothers, Our Stories, Our Legacies. Please click on the link on the bottom of today's show page to be able to purchase the book on Amazon. And it is about being able to say, this book is a memoir, to be able to say, I wonder if, let me tell you my story. It's almost as if an opportunity to be able to give you a gift to share your life's journey. Take the time, share it, feel it, just give it out to others and to your family. Thank you so much for joining us today. This is Dr. Jeanette Gallagher, and until tomorrow, have a great day.
Today we discussed many life-changing concepts. Who do you turn to, and how do you know what is best when faced with a health crisis? Dr. Jeanette is a patient advocate. She listens to the patient, the doctors, and the family. clarifies the health issues and concerns, then helps the patient make the best choices going forward. If you would like help implementing change into your life and health, we can talk and see where you are stuck and how to improve the quality of your life. Check the link on the bottom of today's show page or visit drjeanettegallagher.com to schedule a phone appointment today.